reasonable to expect that the information that is contained in the Quran should reflect the perfect and absolute wisdom and knowledge that is from God. We should expect, of course, that a book that is from God to be consistent with the reality of the universe around us. Since God is the creator of the universe, and God is the creator of all things, and God is the one who knows everything, surely a book that is from God should be consistent with what we can observe to be facts. Now, importantly, we are talking here about facts. And so what I have tried to confine myself to are those aspects that are very clear and that are very obvious and that are not ambiguous. We're not talking here about so much scientific theory, although, of course, in a philosophical sense, every statement in science is a theory. Everything is a theory. It's only, in the eyes of scientists, a theory that is very, very strongly proven with very, very strong evidence, as opposed to a theory that may have very little evidence or perhaps even no evidence at all. And so scientists put their faith, as you could say, they put their faith in those theories which simply offer the best explanation and have the strongest degree of evidence. However, we have really only tried to select those statements from the Quran that are supported by the strongest degree of scientific evidence. And again, we only say this because the Quran is not a scientific textbook. It's not a book of science. It's a book of guidance. But we should expect that it does not contradict the reality of the world around us. So I have chosen some of those statements in the Quran that have also amazed and fascinated me personally. And I remember that when I first read the Quran for myself, one of the things that astounded me about the Quran was that it lacked the fables and the fairy tales and the type of fantastic statements that you would expect from a book that was revealed 1,400 years ago. In fact, what I discovered is that its statements were truly amazing. We will be talking about some of those things after the break. Don't go away. Stay there for the proof that Islam is the truth. Welcome back to the proof that Islam is the truth. I'm Abdurrahim Green, and I'm going to be talking today about some of the amazing statements in the Quran concerning the natural world. Some of the amazing findings that we find in the Quran that agree with present scientific observations. Amongst one of the most remarkable of them are without doubt the statements in the Quran dealing with the development of the human fetus. Now, it's interesting as a comparison to see what was the state of knowledge at the time of the Prophet Mohammed, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. Because you would expect a work that has been made by human beings to reflect the ideas and the concepts that were prevalent at the time. If Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, had invented the Quran, had authored the Quran himself, most certainly he would have picked up the ideas that were normal amongst the Arabs and the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, and so on and so forth. So one of the prevalent theories was, of course, the Aristotelian theory, and Aristotle was one of the first people to really begin to make scientific investigations and theories as to the origin of human life. When I say one of the first people, certainly in the Western world, he was one of the first people. And also he's one of the people whose statements have been recorded and preserved for posterity. There may, of course, have been others. But his theory was very, very common. And his idea was that the male sperm acted as rennet in cheese to congeal the female menstrual blood. And from the congealing of the female menstrual blood, the human embryo was formed. Now he based this upon his observation that when women became pregnant, their monthly periods ceased. And so he theorized that therefore something must happen to that monthly period, and what happened to it was that it congealed in order to form a human life. Now, of course, we realize at this time that such a theory is completely false. Even as late as the 18th century, a man called Hartsoker claimed to have seen through a primitive microscope various sperms of different animals. And so looking through this primitive microscope, he claimed that he could see inside the actual sperm a preformed human being, a little child crouched up. Similarly, he claimed that in the giraffe sperm, for example, he could see a long neck, and in the rabbit's sperm there was a big ears and stuff like that. And this was known as the preformation theory. Of course, again today we know that that is false. And it's an example, of course, of those type of theories that sometimes float around in science that later show to be false and even quite laughable. And that's the case with both Aristotle and the ideas that were prevalent in the 18th century. And it's not really until the 19th century that we began to develop an accurate description of the stages of human embryonic development. Now, what we want to examine is, what does the Quran say? If the Quran was a forgery, if the Quran was invented and written by Prophet Mohammed, as people claim, then surely it would reflect the ignorant beliefs of the time. However, it does not. Let us read the 23rd chapter of the Quran, verses 12 to 16. The meaning of it is this: we created man from a quintessence of clay. This, by the way, is referring to the creation of Adam. Muslims believe that God created Adam miraculously, not like the rest of the creation. He took clay, Allah took clay from different places in the earth, and He formed from this clay the shape of a man, and He gave life to this form, and thus Adam was created. And from the rib of Adam, Eve was created. So this is what Muslims believe. And so when Allah says, we created man from a quintessence of clay, this is talking about the creation of Adam. But the Quran goes on to say, we placed him as a drop. And the word in Arabic is nutfa. Nutfa means a drop, in a place of rest, firmly fixed. Then we made the drop into an alaq. And I will tell you what these words mean in a moment. So first, we placed him as a nutfa. Then we made the drop into an alaq. And then we changed the alaq into a mudgha. And then we made out of that mudgha bones. And then we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we caused him to grow and come into being and attain definitive form. So Allah is mentioning the stages: nutfa, alaq, mudgha, laham. Okay, so these are the stages. And then we begin to look like human beings. And Allah goes on to say, blessed be Allah, the perfect creator. After that, you will die. Again, on the day of judgment, you will be raised up. It's very important, my dear listeners, that Allah, at the same time as He is mentioning these amazing and astounding facts that science has only discovered recently, immediately afterwards Allah is reminding us that you will die.